It's the Voice of Wrestling right here on voiceofwrestling.net and, of course, Fight TV and ProWrestling.com. I am your host, Chris Cash, alongside Nick Paglino, as always, and we are here to give you your week of pro wrestling news, although we're not going to spend a lot of time on a variety of topics. In fact, we've got a huge guest that we are excited about. Jeff Jarrett is joining us later on in just a few minutes, actually, to announce and talk about this huge press release that was just released early this afternoon or morning. I forgot exactly when it hit on Fight TV. A huge partnership with one of our partners in Fight TV, and he's going to talk about that in just a little bit. But Nick, you and I have a couple of other major things to discuss this week, and I think it's going to be really pretty solidified in what people have been talking about and what we should talk about this week as far as Brock Lesnar. We're also going to run down Extreme Rules for this Sunday. So really our two main things to discuss. And of course, Brock has kind of been in the background, Nick, running for a while because of the storyline they've been trying to put over and what's been going on with it. But now we cannot not talk about Brock Lesnar because of what took place, where he shows up at a UFC event. Before we get into kind of what we think this means and analyze it and dissect it like we always do, I'm curious, ProWrestling.com, guys, if you haven't been there to check out the latest, get there and stay up to date. But Nick, what do we know about the reality versus work part of this? What is WWE saying about this, if anything? Like, what do we know about just this kind of impromptu, at least on the surface and what it looks like, appearance by Brock Lesnar at UFC?
Well, I think it's so interesting, because it's changing almost by the week. Mm-hmm. What we know right now as of the time this show is airing, because you really can only talk about as of the time the show is airing. And I'm sure after Extreme Rules on Sunday and then after Raw on Monday, we might have an even clearer picture of exactly what Brock Lesnar's role is going to be at SummerSlam. That's if he has a role at SummerSlam. What we know right now, as far as it pertains to Brock Lesnar's UFC career, is that, of course, he did make his big return at UFC 226. The fight is on with Daniel Cormier. USADA, which is actually the drug testing program that he has to enter, it's actually the athletic commission that governs it. It was actually the testing process that he failed when he was fighting for UFC 200 against Mark Hunt, and that was the reason why that fight decision was overturned, because he did fail those USADA drug tests. But USADA issued a statement earlier this week saying that Brock Lesnar has indeed re-entered the drug testing pool. Now, he still has 6 months of a suspension to serve based on the violations and the suspension that took place back in UFC 200. Now, it wasn't a situation where his suspension has been ongoing this entire time, but because he was given the length of the suspension that he was given, when he decided that he was quitting, quote unquote, quitting UFC, and he was back with WWE, the suspension freezes. So now that he's back and re-entering that USADA drug testing pool, that suspension picks up right where it left off. So he has 6 more months left on that suspension, which will make him eligible to fight in January of 2019. That's important to remember, because I think a lot of people, when they first saw that, Brock Lesnar's back, he's challenging Daniel Cormier, well, that must mean he's done with WWE. That does not mean that at all. He has all of this time between now and when he does fight again in UFC, which can't at the very least be until January of 2019. Right. He has all of that time in which he can compete for WWE if he wants to. So to say or to suggest that SummerSlam will be his last match is very inaccurate, because what we're hearing on that front is that as of now, it's the same as it was when we last reported this, which is that there's a very good chance Brock Lesnar might not wrestle at all at SummerSlam. Right. And in fact, as of now, he does not have a scheduled match at SummerSlam. So I expect we're going to get more information about his future in WWE and his next title defense, conceivably after Extreme Rules, or more likely after Raw next Monday, after Extreme Rules. And of course, we'll talk about it more then when it comes out. But between now and January, anything can happen.
Sure.
It could also be very possible because, let me ask you this, Chris, gut feeling, if they were to announce that, all right, Brock Lesnar is going to defend the Universal title against, say, a Roman Reigns or a Bobby Lashley at SummerSlam, I would think a lot of people are going to predict, oh, well, that's when Brock Lesnar is going to drop the title. And even that is not a guarantee because, again, you could very believably see Brock Lesnar fight again at Survivor Series. You could see him wrestle again at potentially any of those other pay-per-views in October or in December. You could conceivably see him appear at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view, depending on when that Cormier fight actually happens. Because remember, it's just at the very least January of 2019. The fight might not take place until next spring,
sure,
which means Brock Lesnar could be around with WWE until WrestleMania. So I think one of the biggest tells of him returning to UFC is that his WWE future is still very much open-ended.
So I have a theory I want to run by you. What
Sure.
is the possibility, Nick, that all of this is Vince's way? We know how eager he's been to get Roman Reigns over as a babyface. What if the entire thing is just a setup? What if Brock going to UFC is just this big setup? Him showing up at this last event, and of course fighting Cormier. All of this is just to continue to play up the fact that he's never in WWE, he's never there. And if that's true, Nick, is there any chance that it succeeds in getting Roman Reigns over as an actual babyface?
I don't think. And I'll tell you why.
Did I not do a good job? Did I not do a good job making that very sarcastic? Because clearly, I don't think this is a ruse.
You made it. God, it was so very clear to me that it was so very clearly sarcastic to me that I now love Roman Reigns.
Okay, good.
You've convinced me. I'm not. Well,
I was hoping.
Everybody actually knows I am a big, huge Roman Reigns fan. I'm not one of those people. I'm not one of the big Roman Reigns.
You don't like where he's at though right now. You don't like where he's at in the character.
No, certainly. To be honest with you, I think a lot of people that do boo Roman Reigns at the live events,
yep,
I don't think it's because they actually dislike the guy. Again, I think it's more that idea we've talked about before, the position that he's in, maybe the way WWE is booking him, the storytelling involved. But to answer your question, even though it was sarcastic, it may even be worth an answer. No, that's not going to help him. What's going to help him is things like what we saw on Raw this week, which I think was really well done. You got Bobby Lashley coming off of a feud that, we're all ready to rate as the biggest pile of hot garbage of 2018. And even he was able to redeem himself with some really great stuff on Raw this week. I think the little that we have seen from Roman Reigns versus Bobby Lashley heading into Extreme Rules this Sunday, I think has been excellent.
Yeah.
I think both guys have been excellent. That's the kind of thing that's going to get Roman Reigns over. And we mentioned this before. Don't use someone else. It's like basically getting me. It's like if I want you to like me, I'm trying to get you to like me by continuously showing you pictures of the world's worst people. It's like, well, hey, look at Hitler.
Yeah.
So
right. You're pretty good. Yeah.
It's what they're trying to do here with Roman Reigns. It's not going to work,
Yeah.
All right. Let's all really, really hate Brock Lesnar. But the point is, if Brock Lesnar is not on television, if we never see him, What does that have to do with how I like Roman Reigns when he comes out? So I think everything that Roman Reigns has been doing in the past few weeks, after he came off his program with Jinder, after Bobby Lashley came off his program with Sami Zayn, I think it's been great. And I actually look forward to what I think will be a really great, hard-hitting match on Sunday. But there was something, if we really want to look at what's going on with Brock Lesnar and WWE, and that's my question here, is that, WWE, and this will be my question to you, WWE does not do things unless they know they're going to strongly benefit from it. And I remember on Saturday night, I didn't watch the UFC event. I just remember, all of a sudden, I got 6 texts saying, oh my God, Lesnar's back in UFC. You've got to see what he did. It was a wrestling promo.
Right.
So I watched this thing, and it's unbelievable to me. I mean, this guy and Daniel Cormier, was this not just a pure... They looked to me like I thought I was watching the end of Raw.
Yeah.
This was 100% pro wrestling right here.
Yep.
And it probably pissed off a lot of UFC fans because UFC fans love to hate pro wrestling. But look at what we've got here. We've got an old-fashioned pro wrestling angle, complete with one guy calling out the other guy and then both of them cutting 2 promos. This is ending a real competitive sports event, a UFC event. Okay. Shortly after this happens, WWE.com releases a statement, of course, which I knew that was coming. The Beast is back in UFC. What does it mean for his status in WWE and his current contract issues? Stay tuned for more. And then we watch Raw on Monday night, and there was no mention of Brock Lesnar by anyone whatsoever. What do you make of that?
I think what it has to mean, Nick, and I don't know that we know all the contract situation that Brock entered when he came back to WWE. I mean, I assume there was no stipulations that prohibited him from going to UFC. Is there?
Correct. Just to clarify for you, because that was probably, I could have added that at the beginning, when you had asked me.
Right.
As it pertains to his actual contract status, what we know is that he can go work for, he can negotiate a fight with UFC, and he has 1 match left on his current WWE deal. I guess the idea, and this part is speculation on my behalf, but I'm guessing when WWE wants to have that match for him, that's their call. But he does owe them 1 more match on his current contract. So continue on.
So I'm going to assume, Nick, that most likely, maybe I'm not going to say WWE was blindsided by this. I can't imagine that him and Paul, some combination thereof, however they communicate with Brock and Brock to them. I would imagine WWE had to know something like this was possible or that it was going to happen. That being said, they must not have known about it ahead of time or enough in order for them to make the plans that they wanted to make in terms of how to react to it on Raw and publicly. It definitely seems like maybe communication is not where it needs to be. And even though they're kind of working that into a storyline somewhat and Paul's playing it up and everything, it certainly feels like, Nick, that Brock has kind of determined on his own maybe that he's going to go in this direction versus really benefiting WWE along the way. Because I think if Vince knew that he could control all of this, I don't think Brock going back to UFC while simultaneously being used whenever available in WWE is something that Vince would not want to do. Like, it just doesn't make a lot of sense that he wouldn't. Now, maybe you don't want him as your main champion during that time frame, Nick, but I do think that it'd be really foolish for Vince to not look at that as something to work with and utilize, because Brock became a huge star in the UFC and having some mild, I think, and fairly short-term success there, and then coming over and playing up that badass character and stuff that he really did cement in a real fighting arena. And yet now it's like he's still that badass, Nick. He's still a top draw in both UFC and WWE. And then going back to UFC now, it just makes more sense that they would want to utilize. Why wouldn't Vince, if he could control the situation enough? But the way that they reacted, and obviously, as you just mentioned, no mention of him at all on Raw, just makes me think they don't know how to play this yet. They probably don't know when that next match or the final match on his contract at this point is supposed to be. They might not have a communication. They may have some sort of communication barrier at this point. I mean, maybe I'm just reading too much into it, Nick, but I mean, how do you otherwise justify that they did not make mention of it this week on Raw? Because there really is no logical explanation beyond there's some sort of hiccup in the whole system right now as far as communication between these two. Them not mentioning Brock and promoting it and marketing it means maybe they don't have the control over it that they would like to have. Thus, they're trying to figure out how to play this, and maybe they don't know how until they figure it out with Brock. And I mean, otherwise, like, what? How do you justify such a mega event in sports entertainment and UFC and pro wrestling? Obviously, your world champion, your universal champion is showing up on UFC to promote and market a huge match, a return match. Right. And you're not going to put that over in some form or fashion on Raw. There's got to be some breakdown.
I'm wondering if it has maybe something to do with. Did you notice? Did you find it surprising, not surprising, weird, not weird, that they never mentioned at the UFC thing? And then I went back, I watched the whole thing.
Right.
Afterward, when they had the panelists Ariel Helwani and Kel Sonnen, when those guys were talking about it, they mentioned Brock Lesnar was a WWE champion. But on the actual UFC broadcast, they never made mention of Brock Lesnar being WWE Universal Champion. They never even said the letters WWE.
Right.
So it was just former UFC champion, Brock Lesnar is back, no mention of WWE. Do you think it's possible that WWE was upset about that? Because, look, Dana White, in his post-show press conference, he said that there were no issues with Brock Lesnar fighting in UFC as it pertains to WWE, and that, quote-unquote, Brock keeps Vince in the know about those things. So, and I cannot imagine, Brock Lesnar seems like, for all practical purposes, a good, smart businessman. I can't imagine Vince McMahon was sitting at home and all of a sudden there's Brock Lesnar at a UFC pay-per-view and he had no idea. I'm sure Brock gave him a heads up, said, hey, by the way, I'm going to be at UFC.
Right.
I'm making my return. I'm going to do this angle at UFC. Good, great, go. He gets his blessing. Because remember, WWE did acknowledge it via their website in the moments afterward. I think it was it was later that night, or it may have been immediately that next morning, Sunday morning. Now, all of a sudden, you get no mention of it. And even if WWE didn't know how to play it, let's say they didn't know what was going to go down, so they didn't know how to play it, as you suggested. They don't know when his next match is going to be. So they don't have those plans. You'd think at the very least that the announce team would say, they do one segment where they said, and they show the little still shots, they show a little B-roll, from whatever it was, from ESPN or something, breaking news, WWE Universal Champion returns at UFC 226. It sent shockwaves through the MMA community and sent shockwaves through the WWE universe. Right. We will have more in the coming weeks on Brock Lesnar's status, so stay tuned. Because remember, the WWE.com article, it said a lot without saying anything at all.
Yeah.
It basically just touted our champion was at the UFC show. So why couldn't the announce team have just done the same thing on Raw, really not given you any information as to what's going to happen with him, but said, hey, this big breaking news thing happened, stay tuned.
Mm-hmm.
Could it have been a situation where they said, well, you know what? If you're not going to promote us on your show, we're not going to make any mention of you on our show.
Right.
Because that's what it kind of felt like to me. Like they weren't going to acknowledge UFC on their show. And I did find that one part of it surprising. I mean, they're going to do a whole wrestling angle here on UFC. They're going to cut the promos. But at no point is someone going to say, that's the WWE Universal Champion, Brock Lesnar. One time, you're not going to make one mention of that? Because, you know, if you were concerned, and if there was concern from UFC that acknowledging Brock Lesnar in WWE might potentially blur the lines between what's real and what's not, what's a shoot, what's a work, you know.
Right.
Well, then they're not going to have him fight while he's under contract with WWE. They're not going to bring the WWE champion in for a fight if they're afraid of that.
Sure.
So, and they're certainly not going to have what came off to me as a very scripted promo segment at the very end there. The whole, you know, Daniel Cormier says, I want Brock Lesnar. Oh my God, there's Brock Lesnar right there. How did he get there? Right. You know, this whole thing was so strategically set up. Wouldn't they have had their doubts about doing any of that? So why not mention the WWE Universal Champion?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's got to be.
Could WWE have been pissed off about that? We know they can get very pissed off about very petty things. Or is this just me being conspiracy theorist?
No, I think Vince and Dana and the people that are kind of ahead of UFC and maybe some of those decisions at this point, you know, they've always had kind of an interesting relationship, Nick. And so it's kind of one of those situations where you would think that Dana and Vince would at least talk at, you know, ahead of time. But again, I mean,
right.
we don't know all the behind the scenes, which makes it really tough to speculate. Something is off with this, though. Like it just does not make sense that at this point you have Brock show up unannounced somewhat, and then no mention of him there, no mention by UFC of course his WWE standing as champion. Something is off here, which makes it difficult to speculate, and so, you know, we end up looking more like conspiracy theorists. So I think, Nick, it's really difficult to analyze all of this until we kind of find out exactly what's going to happen. I think as you mentioned, maybe on after Extreme Rules and after Monday, we're going to have a little bit more insight that gives them a full week at this point to at least up until then to figure out what the hell's going on and what they're going to do about it. And speaking of, though, Nick, Extreme Rules, I know we want to get to Jeff Jarrett here in just a minute, so limited amount of time. Wanted to talk a little bit about that pay-per-view. I think you've got the card brought up, so we can kind of run it down. And then, of course, very excited to bring Jeff Jarrett on after that. So let's jump into some Extreme Rules predictions, I guess, and analysis, and then yeah, Double J's coming on. I'm excited about it.
Well, to kick things off, you've got a WWE Championship match: AJ Styles versus Rusev. You know, again, really don't, you know, especially with AJ Styles being announced as that WWE 2K19 cover star. They've been pushing the pre-orders with the announcement of Ronda Rousey and Rey Mysterio as the pre-order bonus characters. I just don't see AJ Styles losing the title to Rusev. Not to say that this isn't a feud that might not continue. But, you know, Chris, I'm going to guess that you will agree with me here that Rusev's probably not going to win the title. But the real question is, do you see this feud continuing? Because after Extreme Rules, we have SummerSlam. Could AJ Styles headline SummerSlam against a Rusev, or is he just sort of that transitional challenger right now?
Yeah, but the transition is so fast, and I'm surprised by this in general. Like I think maybe this is a way to pacify A, Rusev, and B, the audience that's been all over WWE at this point for giving him the push that he really does deserve. But I think. Is this the smart way to pacify the crowd or Rusev,
right? Especially if AJ Styles pins him clean on Sunday, and we don't see another match.
Well, you've got to say though that given where he was and what he was doing prior to this, Nick, I think that you have to look at this as still a step up. I mean, it's still a good thing. He might not win. I don't think most people expect him to, even the fans that are cheering for him. But I think AJ Styles is in such a unique position too when you consider him versus someone like Roman Reigns. The AJ Styles is still being bought by the fans. I mean, fans aren't going to turn on AJ Styles anytime soon. They're okay with him winning this match. They're okay with AJ Styles as a long-term champion that he's kind of been. He's been really at the top of SmackDown for many, many, many months. And I think the fans are going to be okay with that, even at the expense of someone that they're also high on in Rusev, who before this match and this feud really was kind of stagnant, even though he was getting over like $1 million. I mean, there was so much controversy, or at least somewhat controversy around him with the Undertaker match, being pulled out, being put back in. I mean, all of this stuff that was going on with him. I just think Vince, sometimes it does, they're better now, Nick, than they used to be, but sometimes it still takes them a while to come around to stars that at least the fans have been high on for a long time previous before they really start getting that push. And I think Rusev is kind of one of those guys, Nick, and I think now we're finally at a point where Vince has come around to him, but I don't think he's all the way there. I don't think he's going to be anytime real soon. AJ Styles definitely wins. I would be surprised if this feud, unless it's a multi-man type of match at SummerSlam or feud, I would be surprised if Rusev versus AJ Styles one-on-one is the SummerSlam main event for the SmackDown side of things. I just don't know that I don't think even fans buy that match for SummerSlam. I think it's transitional. I don't know what happens with Rusev after this, but it was still a step up nonetheless, so long as they don't just push him right back down to where he was. But AJ Styles definitely retains, and I'd be surprised if they don't change it up and go in a different direction for SummerSlam.
Completely agree with you. Now, moving into a potential multi-man situation, you have Roman Reigns versus Bobby Lashley,
right?
Which, I think we all expect, that the winners there, or at least those guys, are the people who are going to be talked about in terms of facing Brock Lesnar for the Universal title whenever that match might take place. But given the fact that we don't necessarily know when that match is going to take place, I don't necessarily know that I would commit to saying Roman Reigns is going to outright win that match. I think if we knew exactly what was going on with Brock Lesnar, I think if we knew he was confirmed for SummerSlam, then I would very much be able to say, this is going to be Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar, kind of where we all saw this headed to begin with. But with the doubt there, I could see them sort of keeping Bobby Lashley in play as a main event guy, potentially to challenge Brock Lesnar, since they're sort of pushing that idea of him being the legit guy that can face Brock Lesnar. I don't necessarily know that I see this match ending clean. I see this match potentially ending in some kind of a brawl disqualification, which then might set up the argument that both guys can make to face Brock Lesnar. So if the match does take place at SummerSlam, maybe it's a triple threat. Maybe it's even a fatal four-way where we see somebody else get inserted to the match. Maybe it's a five-way. Maybe they're going to involve guys like Kevin Owens or Braun Strowman in the match. But right now, I'm going to say, because of the doubt that's being cast over Brock Lesnar's future, I'm going to say this match does not end clean, and whoever wins is going to win via some kind of a DQ finish, setting up the argument that they both have to claim that they're the ones that can face Brock Lesnar.
I can see that. I think that regardless of what happens with Brock, I think one thing stands true in the middle of all of it, and that WWE is still 100% very high on Roman Reigns. And I
without a doubt,
don't think that's going in. I think that because of everything that's been going on, and the uncertainty of Brock, and just the fact that they have to speed up, if there is real confusion there behind the scenes, I think they have to speed up their process of whichever direction they're going with Roman Reigns. And I think that starts with what they're going to consider a good win over Bobby Lashley. And again, I think that's debatable given what's gone on with Bobby Lashley since his return. But just as you mentioned earlier in the show, to me, Bobby is doing a lot better. I mean, they've really positioned him since the Sami Zayn feud in a lot better light, and they started treating him kind of like they should have all along. So therefore, I think that Bobby and Roman is a little bit more presentable. But I don't think they still hold a lot of a stock in Bobby Lashley. Roman Reigns is their guy. They've got to start moving the ball in that direction, even if the fans are going to resist it, if they're going to keep hanging on to it, which I don't think their pride and the money and energy, I don't know that they should. I don't think they necessarily should abandon everything they've put into Roman Reigns because the fans aren't getting. I just think they need to go in a different direction and turn him completely heel and allow him to embrace that versus resist it as much as they have been. So I don't look at Roman as any failed experiment. I'm like you. I'm pretty high on him in a lot of ways. And I think that he does need to start getting back on track with meaningful wins, regardless of how the fans are going to react, because at least they're talking at that point. When you have him in this kind of back and forth of we're trying to pacify fans with how we treat Roman, we don't want to push him the way we would normally push him because fans aren't reacting the way we want. So let's try to mask that reaction by doing this or doing that. Like, that's not working. It's just screwing it all up, in my opinion, Nick. They've got to go forward one way or the other, which is why I think it will be some form of clean win for Roman Reigns at Extreme Rules. I think Bobby's just kind of that throwaway guy to kind of help get Roman back to where they want him to be. Whether that's right, wrong, or whatever, I think that's what's going to happen. And personally, as far as right, wrong, or indifferent, I am probably on the side that it makes sense right now. Bobby is not their future. Roman obviously is in their minds. And I think he's got to start being positioned as such. It makes no sense for Bobby to win this match. It makes no sense for Roman to lose this match, and it makes no sense in my mind, at least, kind of your angle, Nick. It makes no sense for them to have some sort of false finish in this. Give Roman the clean win and let him go on. And of course, if Brock is ready by SummerSlam, that's your main event again. And hopefully by then they'll turn Roman just completely heel. But if they don't, it still makes sense for me to have Roman win this.
I mean, again, I agree from the standpoint that, Bobby Lashley's not the guy.
Right.
So, this could be WWE's way of just keeping him there, knowing full
sure.
on that, he's not the guy that's going to win. Maybe he'll get that title shot just to sort of appease the fans that want to see Bobby Lashley there, or to appease those who feel like Bobby Lashley deserves it and Roman Reigns does not.
Right.
But I don't expect he's going to get it. And the whole thing is just ridiculous to me because you've got just a bona fide challenger in Bobby Lashley
That's
that the
true.
fans can really get behind.
Yeah.
And to not pull the plug on that just is ridiculous to me, But again, this is one of those situations where WWE is, no matter what they do with someone, they're always going to view that person the way they have from day one.
Right.
And if that guy was a mid-card guy, if that guy was a guy that, hey, he left WWE and he went to TNA and he came back, so we're gonna use him in this way. It's very difficult for those guys to ever graduate from that.
Sure.
And that kind of segues really nicely into the Intercontinental title match, which is a 30-minute Iron Man match between Dolph Ziggler and Seth Rollins. Now, I expect Dolph Ziggler to retain here, but as we're seeing on Raw, especially given the fact that this week it was headlined by a big singles match with Seth Rollins versus Drew McIntyre. We talked about this before. Even if Dolph Ziggler gets that win, the point of this feud is not Dolph Ziggler. It's to get Drew McIntyre over, and it's Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre, and it's to build Drew McIntyre's star power. So on the one hand, I'm going to go with Dolph Ziggler retaining here, but I think you're going to, of course, see the story and the talking point be whatever Drew McIntyre does in the match.
I'm with you halfway on that. I think they're obviously extremely high on, but I think it's just a flow of the story, Nick, that they're making sure Drew is not out of the picture with all of this because it makes sense. I think Dolph and Drew together are their focus. I don't think that they're necessarily viewing one over the other. I mean, maybe for the long-term future, that makes sense. But, all of this adding up to what I said last week on the show, that maybe at some point, Nick, we're going to see Dolph and Drew split up. which then kind of helps really ultimately elevate Drew McIntyre, even if that's in the back of their mind. I mean, they're so far from that if they do it the right way, in my opinion. Like, I think they're so far away from that in my mind. I hope they are anyway. And so therefore, to make all of this work, it just makes sense that you elevate both almost equally until, I'm not set on the idea that Drew McIntyre is the surefire bet over Dolph. Like, Dolph is proven and Drew is not. So while I understand and I'm halfway with you on what their expectations and what their goals are with all of this, I'm definitely not willing yet to say that it is a guarantee that Drew versus Seth here soon or Drew in general is their main focus. I really believe that they're looking at Dolph and Drew as a package deal, and so they need to keep Drew. They need to keep Drew intertwined with all of this, Nick. But I don't think that they're discrediting or getting away from Dolph by any stretch. So therefore, I think Dolph does win, by the way. But I think Drew's going to be involved without a question to kind of keep Seth strong, to keep Drew in the mix of it all. But long term and short term, long term, I think that Dolph and Drew have to be treated equally, and them not discredit Dolph and where he's at in this picture and how much he's grown already, in my eyes anyway, as far as credibility. I hope they keep him strong as well and don't rush to the judgment of let's get Drew, give Drew this huge push, and Dolph will eventually fade back into irrelevance in a sense like he has been. I really hope they don't go that direction, at least not anytime soon. But yeah, Dolph definitely has to retain in this match.
We have Alexa Bliss versus Nia Jax. I don't think anyone sees Nia winning this one. I think this is Alexa Bliss here, which would set up the inevitable Ronda Rousey insertion into this picture when her suspension is over. Right. Either a singles match challenging Alexa Bliss or potentially involving Nia Jax, maybe a couple other women, maybe you have a multi-woman match there. But I go with Alexa Bliss on this one, retaining.
100%. I love Alexa.
Steel cage match, Braun Strowman versus Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens is really sort of playing that comedy role right now on Raw. You got Braun Strowman inside of a cage. Sami Zayn is off television due to an injury, so he's not coming back to help Kevin Owens. Barring some kind of incredible, interference, that could potentially, because that's the other thing. You really have to think, too, here that maybe WWE really doesn't know what they're going to do with Brock Lesnar, because look at how open-ended they're booking Braun Strowman.
Sure.
This is a sort of a holdover feud to me, it feels like, you know. Are we going to see Braun Strowman versus Kevin Owens again at SummerSlam after we see a steel cage match? I'm not sure. I think we're going to see Braun Strowman win this match clean, like he always does, and that's going to keep that option open to have him challenge Brock Lesnar in case they figure out what direction they want to go in with Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. But I have Braun Strowman winning this one.
I'll go the other way, only because I think that there's ways in a steel cage match to keep both guys, strong, or keep Braun strong while giving Kevin a Wile E. Coyote type of win, in a sense of somehow escaping. Obviously, he's going to be running scared. Braun's going to be dominant in this match, Nick, but I think keeping him strong and giving him some sort of fluke win, maybe thrown toward, thrown through the cage and his feet technically. I mean, they've had this recently, so I
just
don't,
did it, right?
Right. I don't know if they're going to go this direction so quickly, but something along those lines of Kevin, being the Wiley, the character that tries to get out of the whole thing, and somehow he pulls off a controversial win. But I won't be surprised if Braun just gets it, gets the clean win either. I'm going to go with somehow, because it just seems like they're really high on Kevin right now. But it's just an interesting feud to me, and I love it because I think it's funny in a lot of ways. But I think Kevin is just kind of, I don't know really what I think of it yet. So I'm kind of tossed up on this one, but I'm going to go with Kevin only because maybe I hope they find a way to accomplish both of those things. Keep Braun strong, give Kevin the win, because I'm really high on Kevin. I think he's amazing. So hopefully they go that route, but either one wouldn't surprise me.
Team Hell No versus the Bludgeon Brothers for the SmackDown Tag Team titles. I really feel like they're moving in the direction of The Miz versus Daniel Bryan at the end of the day in that singles feud, which is what I think, that's the direction at least I believe fans want to see it moving in. So, and I don't know if, they're really not doing much with the Bludgeon Brothers. They kind of seem to me like they're falling back into that old sort of stale Luke Harper, Eric Rowan of the Wyatt family territory they were in. But I don't see them pulling the titles off of them yet. I don't know how long the Team Hell No tag team is going to stay together. So they don't need the titles, right, unless they want to go back to that whole I'm the tag team champions. No, I'm the tag team champions thing, which I don't think is very necessary, especially if they want to go Daniel Bryan versus The Miz. I think the smart thing to do here, keep the tag titles on the Bludgeon Brothers. So I have the Bludgeon Brothers winning this one.
Yeah, I'm with you for a lot of the same reasons. I think that I think they have to kind of keep it going with the Bludgeon Brothers. I'm not sure where they're wanting to go with the Daniel Bryan and Kane. And Kane's off, out of WWE mayor run, and everything just seems like it's going to be kind of getting in the way of some things. I'm not real sure where they're going with this, but I think it's just kind of a throw in the mix thing to get some interesting stuff going on, some nostalgia. But I don't know that they're taking Team Hell No that seriously this time. So I don't think the tag team titles are really the direction they're going in with these guys. I think the Bludgeon Brothers gets some form of win.
Very much agreed. That brings us to the Raw Tag Team title match: Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt versus the B Team. It really, as much as I feel like they are building up the B Team a little bit here, it still just doesn't seem right to me that they're going to pick up the tag titles if they do. I mean, I guess the question is, how much does WWE want to relegate this whole program, right, and both of these teams to a joke comedy act? If they really want to go the comedy direction, then you're giving the B Team the titles. It's all but going to pretty much bury any serious credibility Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt may have had as the tag champions. So I still believe it's premature. I'm going to go with Hardy and Bray Wyatt because, again, I just feel like it makes more sense. It's not to say that the B Team can't get that opportunity at some point, but just as we go down this pay-per-view, it just feels like so much of this has been our sort of newer feuds that I don't see why title changes need to happen in a lot of these specific situations. So I'm going to go with the Deleter of Worlds retaining the titles.
I'm going to say B Team wins the match, Nick. I'm going to say they don't win the titles.
Sure.
Disqualification, something. Allow them to keep their little streak alive. Maybe they regret this decision, putting them in a tag meet. Like, by the time they come to pull the trigger and say, well, they're winning, we can't have them not win now, because that's the only thing getting them over is just these fluke wins and everything going the right way for them now. And how do we give them a loss and keep them relevant? I think we give them the win, but don't give them the titles, because I don't think they're anywhere near that. At least I would be amazed if they give them the titles. So I'm going to say they win the match through a disqualification or something. Count out, I don't really know, but the titles don't obviously change hands. And they keep kind of rolling along. And maybe they'll take a big step back at some point and get B Team out of the tag team title picture. But I don't see them. I definitely don't see them winning the titles. And I'm 100% on that, at least as far as my feeling. But I do think they're going to give them the win so they can keep the streak alive.
Carmella versus Asuka for the SmackDown Women's Championship. Again, I feel like WWE loves this combination of Carmella and James Ellsworth, especially when Carmella is the champion. Yeah. This is a feud that I could see continuing on into SummerSlam with Asuka, and Asuka maybe getting that big win at SummerSlam. So I am definitely going with Carmella to retain the title on this one.
I agree.
Jeff Hardy versus Shinsuke Nakamura. This could be my first title change prediction of the night. I think with Nakamura coming away empty-handed against AJ Styles in what I think overall was potentially a feud that a lot of people thought was lackluster. Right. Even though those matches were very good, maybe a lot of people didn't think they were to the standard of AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura. And Nakamura coming out empty-handed. Like we said, he's still being pushed as that top heel in the company. We know how much Vince McMahon loves the heel the heel United States champion, the foreign heel United States champion. So a guy like a Rusev, or a Jinder Mahal, who's a foreigner, who's the anti-American, with Shinsuke Nakamura doing the no speak English routine right now. I feel like it just makes total sense for Shinsuke Nakamura to defeat Jeff Hardy. I don't think Jeff Hardy really needs that mid-card title right now. He's a superstar on his own. I go with Shinsuke Nakamura winning the title.
I'm with you on this. I mean, I think that when you look back, and it's just bad timing. AJ Styles was your go-to guy. Didn't get the opportunity for Nakamura to get a win in that feud. But I mean, all in all, I think he's a proven character at this point in WWE, and I absolutely think that a good title win, really satisfies his storyline, satisfies his fans. I'm with you. Jeff Hardy doesn't need it. So I hope they go this direction with Nakamura, because I think heel Nakamura is much better than babyface Nakamura, and I think it's really fun to watch him week in and week out. I think putting a title on him and also just seeing how it looks around his waist and seeing how he operates and how people react to it is a good thing, as far as how far you want to go with him down the line, maybe for a world title at some point. So I think Nakamura definitely wins this match. I mean, and if not now, very, very soon, I think he's got to. But I think this is the best timing for him to go ahead and win kind of a mid-card title against Jeff. So I'm going with Nakamura as well. I agree with you.
And finally, we have Finn Balor versus Constable Corbin, who I despise. I really think this Constable Corbin thing, I get what they're trying to do. Put him in more of a character role, give him a bit more purpose with a character, but the wrestling in a button down and
I know
jeans and the new look is just so less intimidating than, he had a real badass look about him before. And this whole bald hair thing, bald head thing with the somewhat corporate attire that he's wearing, it just does not work for me. I do not like what they're doing with Corbin right now. The one thing he had going for him was his really great, intimidating look. And I feel like this new gimmick is just completely taken away from that. Finn Balor desperately needs a win. I'm going to go with Finn Balor here. Although I'm nervous that they may go with Baron Corbin. I mean, if Baron Corbin beats Finn Balor clean, I might be about ready to throw the towel in for Finn Balor. I really don't know how much they value him at this point. Yeah. Up against what's happening with Corbin right now. I'm going to go with Finn Balor because I think he deserves that win, and I think Baron Corbin in this new role, I think he can afford the loss. But these are two guys right now that are in a rough spot right now, I think, agree. On Raw, and are just meandering, and it won't be a great loss for either of these guys. It's not going to do wonders for either of these guys, but Finn Balor has the upside here, so I'm gonna go with Finn Balor, mostly because I hope that's the direction they go in. No,
I agree, and I'm going with Finn Balor too, and I'm kind of with you on the concern, but I think it's a telltale sign. I think this really does solidify if Finn Balor loses this match, what WWE, like, where they value him or where they don't, obviously. So I think this is a huge telltale sign. There's no way Finn can lose this match against Baron Corbin right now in his current state. So it has to be Finn Balor, surely. And if it's not, then I think that, that's certainly something we're going to have to discuss next week. I mean, that'll be a talking point for us if Finn loses this match. But Finn, I still feel pretty comfortable even saying that I think Finn wins. I don't think they go Baron at this point. But yeah, Finn Balor for sure. So is that it? That's it. Awesome, guys. I don't want to waste any more time, man. I want to spend as much time as we can with this next guest. It's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. We got him on the phone. We're going to connect with Jeff Jarrett when we return right here on The Voice of Wrestling. And we're back on The Voice of Wrestling. Chris Cash and, of course, Nick Paglino. And we are extremely excited to have the guest that we were hyping up last week. Have never had this guest on The Voice of Wrestling, and it's technically 15 plus years off and on that we've broadcast. We've never had Jeff Jarrett, and I've always wanted to, but Jeff Jarrett joins us now. Jeff, thanks for coming on the show.
15 years? Dude, is that accurate?
It's been a long time since technically I started the Voice of Wrestling. Yeah, it's been a long time.
Well, man, I've like to say I've done my fair share, and I don't know how we haven't crossed paths, but I'm happy we have, and it's pretty how the Lord works in mysterious ways. Of all days, we actually are connecting, and pretty cool news. And you're on the Fight Network, and I've got a partnership, and pretty special day. I'm pretty nervous, pretty excited, but no, guys, I appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to talking all things voice wrestling.
Well, you know what? You actually you kind of brought it up, and we'll jump right into this because I know we're all busy and we're all pressed for time. And it's interesting because today was the day, as we air this on Fight TV tonight. Earlier today, you actually had a big announcement in conjunction with, of course, our network as well, Fight TV. That's really exciting, actually. You've got some huge events coming up, some kind of one-man shows, so to speak. I'm really curious to learn more about that, but big news that just broke, and if you haven't read the press release, it's on the dirt sheets. Of course, Nick has it up at ProWrestling.com and Fight.tv. That's FITE for everybody that's under a rock listening to our show and has never been there. But Fight.tv. Jeff, talk about these big-time, huge shows that you are now in conjunction with Fight TV to air later this month.
Well, you know, wow, as I sit here, it really is somewhat coming into focus, something that, yes, I've been super busy, but how it's all sort of coming together, and I'm getting to talk about this. And before I talk about July 25th, live on Fight TV, which I'm super excited about. You know, it's going to be uncharted territory for me in this business. London, July 23rd is going to be my first ever spoken word tour, but, you know, 25th live, only my third spoken word show. So it is new, uncharted territory, but man, it's pretty cool how today the announcement, you know, came out, but man, my relationship with Fight, and I'll say /Flips, you know, the parent company is still called Flips Media, and I started a relationship with those guys back several years ago as we went into myself and Global Force, as we went into Wrestle Kingdom 9 with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Those folks approached us and wanted to bring their annual Dome show to pay-per-view here in the States, and one thing led to another, and I was introduced to Flips, and we you know, we connected, and at that time, Mike Weber was working, who's now the COO of Fight. You know, at that time, he was working for Global Force and a consulting basis. And so the relationship goes back that far. And the numbers that we did on pay-per-view, and, you know, remember at that time, it was on direct, dish, in-demand, you know, all cable and satellite systems. So Flips was really our avenue to generate awareness and transactional pay-per-views outside of the United States. And so the relationship goes back that far. And then over the last couple of years, we've worked at an arm's length off and on. And obviously my work with Impact and Impact had their shows on Fight. But just early this year, you know, my year started off with a bang, and obviously at the very top of that list was the Hall of Fame situation. Yeah. But, you know, right beside that was Fight. And after the Hall of Fame, I had much more time on my hands. I mean, much more the ability to, you know, I wasn't so pressed for time on so many different things. But, you know, I laser focused, and we came to an agreement. And, you know, this is the second announcement that we made as far as Global Force Entertainment bringing content to Fight. And it's just crazy how things have come down the pike. But I can assure you the announcement we made on Monday is, you know, I put in my tweet, groundbreaking, history making, to bring an event like that surrounded around All In. You know, StarCast is a once in a lifetime, but also never been done. Those many people under one roof. It's, you know, as me and Conrad and the teams, collective teams have put our heads together, you know, it's generations and the very, very top stars from each generation going back over 5 decades. So StarCast is coming up, the Ain't He Great Tour live from Sheffield. So I'm super, super excited about it. watching the press release come out and the teams, and when I say the teams, all working together, Global Force and the Fight team, and then obviously StarCast and their team, and all this coming down the pike. It's pretty cool, and it certainly shows where you get, and I'm sure Nick, and both of you guys, Chris, 15 years ago when your show started, Chris, you certainly didn't envision, and if you say you did, I'm going to call you a liar. You certainly didn't envision it being on a streaming app called Fight. So it's pretty cool how technology is guiding our way in the wrestling business. It's really cool.
And really kind of bringing together different forms of the entertainment as well, because here we're a wrestling talk show, and we're being presented on that same platform as a pay-per-view, an in-ring wrestling show or a boxing show or an MMA show or something like StarCast, So it's really exciting to see all of those things kind of coming together under one platform. And that kind of brings me to the news that just broke of this Sheffield show that you're going to be going live. Give us a little preview of what fans can expect to see on this live show, which is another thing that's pretty cool about it. It is a live show airing from England, so with the time difference, fans over here in the United States, what can we expect from that show?
Well, I heard my old friend Randy Savage. He always referred to live TV as no net. There's nothing to catch you, and the wonderful world of technology. In a post-produced world, the wrestling matches, the promos, the entrances, the lighting, everything virtually can be almost perfect, so to speak. But when you do something live in front of a live audience, and I use this term roughly, but it's the only real term come to my mind right now, script, format. At times that can go right out the window, and that's something that I've always really enjoyed because all this has come about quite frankly based on the Hall of Fame. I never expected it. I have said it multiple times. I was as shocked as anybody out there. I didn't see it coming, and I know the fans didn't see it coming, and I'm positive there are people internally at the WWE that didn't see it coming. But I'm very thankful and grateful that it did. And then sort of one thing led to another, and the promoters in the United Kingdom hooked on events. Event Merch is a merchandise company that I've worked with since back in the early 90s when they were doing the merchandise for the WWF at that time. So I've had a relationship with that family who runs Event Merch for years, and hooked on events. I've dealt with the promoters there for 15 years, and they thought it was a good idea, and I just sort of had to, scratch my head and said, now wait a minute, I'm an in-ring performer and I'm a promoter. Spoken word, I'm not real sure. I'll leave that to the Bruce Pritchards of the world, or to the Jim Rosses of the world, or even Conrad. I'll leave that up to those guys. And one thing led to another, and they said, no, come on over, and you got a lot to talk about. I've been approached over the years, especially the last 5 to 7 years, about a book, and I've always no, my career's not over. I'm not interested. But as the Hall of Fame came down, and then since that, I was approached, and I'm like, okay. And I look back, there's just different eras, and I've got into the studio with Dale Oliver, who I've done music with for 15 plus years at TNA, and looking at how Double J was the singing cowboy, but how music has influenced my career. The different themes and how that's gone in, and then the contributions I've made to other talent themes and stuff like that, and India and TNA and Road Dogg, and just all the stuff that back in the Memphis days. There is a lot to talk about. So we brought Kenny McIntosh on board. I'm super excited about that, but he's got a reputation to live up to. That he did not agree to come on board until he said, Jeff, you've got a lot to talk about. And quite frankly, you've been in some controversial situations that have surrounded you throughout your career. I want to be able to take off the gloves and get down to it. And some of the promo material that's going to be released, I said something to the effect, there's fact, there's fiction, but I'm going to be in the chair. and Kenny and the fans are going to ask the questions, and we're going to roll tape and see how it turns out. So it's going to be live TV, no net, as Macho Man used to say.
I'm kind of curious, talking a little bit about, obviously, how all of it came to pass, and I don't know what kind of details you want to go in ahead of your Hall of Fame induction and kind of how everything got there, but I would like to talk a little bit about the Hall of Fame as well, and just it took you by surprise, you just mentioned, but at the end of the day, talk a little bit about how those events led up to you being asked and everything, because we know at the end of the day you had left Impact, and then of course we heard WWE might have paid for a rehab, but at what point kind of during, and then of course we know you were inducted into the Hall of Fame, and that was kind of the chain of events as far as publicly being put out there, Jeff. What was the timing kind of along those lines, and how did it come to be? When were you asked to be inducted into the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, it's obviously no secret, and quite frankly, 2017, on the one hand, was one of the darkest hours of my life, but in this side of it, and looking in the rearview mirror, it's quite frankly, very possible at this stage of my career, the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me. I ended sort of on a low note, to put it softly, of 2017, but I started off literally the first week of this year, January, and when I say early January, I mean early January. I got the call from a high-ranking WWE official who I will continue to leave nameless, just out of respect for the entire situation. And they asked, and I literally had to have a long pause, and I'm like, and I've said this, so I do sound like a broken record, but it's my reply, it's my response. And I just said, hey, am I supposed to think on this? Am I supposed to? Is this check the box? Yes, I will. No, I won't. Or maybe. It's like I chuckled, and I'm like, man, it was just surreal. And I'm like, absolutely, I will, because I never viewed myself Hall of Fame worthy. It didn't enter into the brain, and just in all totality, I've never been a guy that has really looked in the rearview mirror about anything. It's always one foot in front of the other, and in this business, you're only really as good as what you did yesterday, and not even that good. Because it is a really, really hard grind of an industry. It'll gobble you up if you let it. So I never gave it a second thought, but I got the call in early January and had to keep it under wraps. They didn't even let it out till late February. Just Karen, for several weeks, was the only person, on my side of things that knew anything about it. Then, as teenagers will do, they saw, and I've told this story, they had our family computer and the screen up, and Karen had looked at, I think she had looked at a couple of she had a couple of windows open, some airline tickets and some travel, and had a little New Orleans website, and then some dresses. And the kids are smart. They put two and two together, and they just said, hey, what's up? Is Dad going to WrestleMania? And so anyway, and then when it was announced that that Monday morning, I was at the gym, and I've told this story before too. It's just the craziest things how things go down the pipe. The very first text I got, literally, it was announced at noon or 11 o'clock. I'm not sure which one Central, but literally at 11:02, I got a text from Ric Flair. And said, congrats, welcome. And that was one of the guys that, as a child, I grew up idolizing. And for him to give me that text, it was really cool. So 2018 started off with a bang, and I hadn't slowed down since.
That's awesome.
It's interesting when you say, and I did hear you say it before in some of the videos that WWE put out, during the Hall of Fame ceremony and afterward, that you had kind of reiterated that it was surreal to you and it was surprising to you, and then you just told us now that you didn't really consider yourself Hall of Fame worthy. So what in your mind, what do you think it was that brought you there? Was it ever explained to you? Because the criteria, you look at other sports and you look at their Hall of Fames, you might be able to run down the line and say, okay, well, here's the criteria to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. With the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame and WWE, it's a little more open-ended. So what do you think is the reason why? Was it explained to you why? What got you there?
Well, at about 6:30, the Tuesday before 6:30 in the morning, the Tuesday before the induction, WWE camera crews came, and they were going to document my first time being back at a WWE event. So SmackDown was in Nashville that day, and so the guy just sort of asked me off the cuff, and I got real emotional, somewhat out of nowhere, because I run a business, and I said it. He didn't have to make this decision. And we all know who I'm talking about. And so, I'm super grateful for that. And I don't really entertain the thoughts of the why, because you can't put your thumb on it. But, I'd have to say from an objective POV, from a point of view, that you have to look back. And I don't think it's any one thing. Staying in the game 32 years, I'm a third generation. My grandmother promoted, my father promoted, wrestled. You can say 6-time Intercontinental Champion, start my own organization, my work in India, scouting talent, WCW runs. Hell, I'm famous for hitting Beetlejuice. So I think that alone put me in. But no, the guitar shots with both. But I know you don't really. To me, it's certainly not up for discussion in my brain, but I don't know. And all I can say is I am very grateful and very, very thankful that the opportunity was presented, and what a weekend it was. I mean, Kid Rock's one of my buddies of mine, but always been one of my favorite artists. And the picture on my wall that was sent to me, I'm standing next to Kid Rock, in the induction ceremony, and you got, Team 3D guys that worked for us for many years, almost as many years as they had at WWF, and super, super successful. And Bill Goldberg, I went, spent my time in WCW, and he, in a lot of ways, was the face of WCW for that Attitude Era. Sting is the franchise player, in my opinion, for that promotion, but Goldberg was a meteor. I mean, just a rocket, and exploded onto that scene. And you look at that, and just that Hall of Fame class, and it was really, really cool weekend.
Jeff, I'm kind of curious to I'm an entrepreneur. I remember you talked about the technology advancements now that you're on Fight TV and all the stuff you guys have coming up with online streaming. And of course, I remember back 15 years ago when I started this, I had to splice telephone wires together to my computer mic to be able to to take calls and all of that. But what I'm curious about is when you think about your Hall of Fame induction and kind of how you got there, maybe as you look back at your career more broadly, what you're more proud of as far as the in-ring performer that you've been and your experience there, and or you're one of a very select amount of people in the wrestling business. A lot of wrestlers have come and gone, Jeff, but very few people can honestly say that they have started a wrestling company that got boosted to number 2 without a question, at least in domestically and maybe in the country. You would know more about the stats as far as how it stacks up to some of your big shows, overseas. But either way, the number 2 wrestling company in the world, as far as everybody listening to this show probably puts it. And then your vision. I mean, we know you had ups and downs along the way, but like, is there a way to kind of compare your in-ring pro wrestling career individually and everything you accomplished there versus kind of the business side of it and what you accomplished starting Impact and TNA, and is there one or the other that you're more proud of when you kind of look back?
It's easy to say, and I was never and never, you look at my style, whether I was a heel or a babyface. My goal was to always, and I learned this literally before day one, go out and make your opponent look the best you possibly can, and that'll take care of how you look. And that's how I was literally. That was my mentality. So you've got to make your opponents look as good as you possibly can. And I always tried to carry that through no matter what the haters may or may not think. But that's the truth. From the Memphis days to the Double J days to the Chosen One days to the TNA early days to the TNA later days, that was sort of my mentality as far as in-ring. I mean, when I think about my current situation, I'm the mega campeon of AAA. Right. Arguably, I say obviously WWE is the number one organization in the world, and I think New Japan and AAA are 2A and 2B, for different reasons and different things. And, Mexico and Japan, obviously, from a country's perspective, they have a lot of similarities, but they also have a lot of differences. But, they're both in the lineage that go back generation upon generation. It's built into the culture. But that's my in-ring career. So if you're holding a gun to my head and asking me, it's easy for me to answer. It's the promotion, because the fruits of my work that went into my in-ring career, which I still love, only can only pay off so much. But the fruits of my work of starting an organization, of promotion, and the hard work, the ups and downs, the in-betweens, the blood, the sweat, the tears, everything that went into it, that can literally pay off for generations. Because there is a generation today, as we sit here speaking, that literally idolizes, and they want to be the next AJ Styles. Right. They want to be the next Samoa Joe. They want to be the next Bobby Roode. That's what they want to be. And, you could go down that list on and on. And so the promotional work, the Rinka King deal in India, it was not near as blossomed like we had all hoped. But you know what? That came from a decision so high up, way, way above the network in India. It went way above all that. But, when I look back on that time, the crew that we put together over there and came out, Bollywood Boys were a part of it, and there's several in that crew. But no, I'm the promotional side of things, and that's why, we're here talking today, and on the heels, literally we announced the spoken word tour from Sheffield and the StarCast things, and we've got more things in the pipeline. Those kind of things today excite me. It's incredible, because I know with the technology, I know the fan base. WWE, obviously the leader in the marketplace. WWE Network got out front. Vince is a visionary. Once again, he is not just paving the way; he's knocking down doors. Wrestling. I chuckle at some of the, I'll call it, the fringe journalists who asked me, "Well, what's your thoughts? Do you think wrestling will ever be back in the mainstream, or do you think it is mainstream?" And I just chuckled to myself, and I go, okay, Monday Night Raw has been on 25 years. It's always been in the top 10, always. Nitro was at the ratings there. I was on WCW Thunder in the dying days. It was It was in the top 5 of all of TBS's programming when they took it off the air, and that's back, quote unquote, 20 years ago. Now you look at the network, and guys, in case you are living a rock up there and you're listening to this, WWE is going to broadcast network on Fox. In my opinion, they do sport, not just entertainment. They do sport better than anybody else. So it is mainstream. The Rock, he's the most successful, actor in all of Hollywood right now. So wrestling is mainstream. True. The technology's there, and I'm just super excited to play my role and play my part in continue it, and with the international capabilities and Fight's technology and their vision and how we've collectively come together. I'm just super excited about the future.
You brought up the television deal, and that's an interesting, as soon as I heard that as well, I thought the exact same thing. Moving to Fox, this is incredible. Fox Sports, specifically, what do you make of that? Do you see the SmackDown product, the fact that Fox is putting it under its sports umbrella as opposed to under its entertainment umbrella? Do you see the product changing at all? Do you think, knowing Vince, do you think that that's something he would be open to? What did you make of it going to Fox Sports as opposed to just regular Fox?
I know the folks at Fox Sports, from Eric Shanks down, and when I'm a little bit of a geek nerd when I watch sports, because I'll watch not only for the competitive nature that's taking place, whether it's basketball, football, whatever game, but also how it's presented, the commentators, the graphic packages, the transitions, the ins, the outs, all the stuff that goes with it. Nobody, in my opinion, produces sports like Fox. And that's directly attributed to the team. It's not like they have a magic warehouse where they conjure up this stuff. They're a team of individuals who strive to put out the very best sports product. And so Vince, the guy is a vision. Every descriptive adjective you want to come up with about being a visionary, have at it. But it goes without saying, success follows him. And I believe that when Vince and his team and Fox and their team get together, I think we're going to see the next evolution of professional wrestling. And I'm super excited as a fan to watch it.
Wow.
So at the end of the day, the buck stops with Vince and his product. It's very evident because I can assure you that, who would have thought that he would have taken a brand away from NBC Universal with all the success they've had on USA and everything that goes with it, but he did. And I think that decision alone speaks volumes of where Vince McMahon's head's at in 2018.
Jeff, I'm kind of curious too. You mentioned earlier AJ Styles, Samoa Joe. You had a huge part in their rise and just everything that they've been able to accomplish now is not obviously just because of you. It's their talent as well. But for so many years, there was this thing in WWE that for whatever reason they, TNA and TNA superstars trying to make it over there, it just did not happen. And if it did happen, they didn't seem to go anywhere. They didn't seem to last very long. That's in the rearview mirror at this point. I mean, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, not only are they over there, but they're flourishing. They're at the top of their game and doing what they love and headlining WrestleManias now. I mean, the door is wide open, not just from an Impact standpoint, but all the way to Sting working in WWE for the first time finally, and fans getting to see that. You've known Vince McMahon. You obviously knew the dynamic when you were with Impact and TNA, and with stars trying to go over there. What has changed along the way, in your opinion, to allow Vince to kind of open up those doors and, again, not hold people back, which some people said was kind of a thing, that maybe even if you got your chance there was a glass ceiling. You were never, if Vince didn't create you, as people would say, but that can no longer be argued. And it's got to be amazing for you, as you mentioned, kind of to see these guys go and flourish with the WWE. But what do you think has changed? Is it Hunter? I mean, you know the guy 100 times better than us, and do you have an idea of what maybe has changed to the point where some of these guys can get a good look and a good start and a good run without a question in WWE now?
Again, this is strictly my opinion.
Sure,
but there's so much talk of different mindset, different change. I really think it's this simple. And I don't read any more into it other than this. If you've got two guys and they're pretty equal in talent, I'm going with my homegrown guy. But
sure.
If I've got an AJ Styles who's head and shoulders much superior to whatever talent you want to say, business is business.
Sure.
AJ, you said it. You said it first. AJ, Bobby, Joe, whoever it may be, they wouldn't be where they're at today unless they had talent, unless they hadn't worked hard, unless they didn't understand their trade, their craft, and knew what they were doing. So they put themselves there, and they made it obviously glaringly obvious. I mean, AJ, I was there on his last night at TNA and all that mess that went down, and he went to Japan, and it was very obvious when he got to Japan. AJ's not 6'6", 250, 350 at all. AJ got to New Japan and is at the very top. And that is we'll call it a wrestler's promotion.
Right.
The in-ring content is at the very, very top of the priority. not so much in other promotions, but it is there. And AJ excelled and then some. And so that obviously, from the TNA days to the New Japan days, his talent supersedes anything. And I think Hunter has got an eye for talent. He obviously does. And said, I want the guy on the roster. He's going to make WWE better. I don't think there's anything other than that. Then you take a Bobby Roode, who's got, several years under his belt. He's a pro's pro. He can have a match with anybody. Same thing. Same thing with Samoa Joe. All these guys that, quote unquote, have sort of broken through that glass ceiling, they've really crushed it, but it's because of their talent.
Not that, yeah. I mean, and I think you're seeing it. We're just clearly seeing it on top of the SmackDown side with AJ Styles, and then before we let you go, because this has been one of the sort of through lines of this show that we're doing this week. This big news of Brock Lesnar coming back to UFC at 226. What do you think of his storyline right now, sort of the way he's being used in WWE? There's a lot of fans that are sort of reacting poorly to the fact that he's not on television all the time, that he's not defending the title. But then he goes over and he's working with UFC again. He's this giant crossover star that now we see another one in Ronda Rousey coming over to WWE. What do you make of the way WWE is using Brock Lesnar right now and really telling the story that he's not interested in working for WWE right now and he'd prefer to work elsewhere? It's a really, to me, it's sort of it's a risky type of a story. What do you think of it?
First off, I love it, and that may be from a guy, like I said, third generation, who've seen a lot of things go down the pike, and sometimes art imitates life, and sometimes life imitates art. And when you have the ability to walk down this path that they're walking, at the end of the day, you always sort of have to go back to this. Nobody's holding a gun to Brock's head, and nobody's holding a gun to Vince and team's head. And so they're walking down the path, regardless of what it may or may not appear. Both sides could quite frankly agree, independently of each other, I'm not coming back, or I'm not using him. And they're obviously not. So they've got the world talking. If I was in UFC's seat, driver's seat, that when you sort of look at it, and I was listening to Sports Talk. I don't know if this was a local show or a national show on Monday, but Brock hadn't had an MMA fight in 7 years. Is that? I think that's.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not. Don't hold me to that, but it's been quite a while. When he steps back in after that many year layoff, and he's arguably their biggest star, that to me is the biggest concern. That is the story of the story, in my opinion. When you have a guy who hasn't been fighting in 7 years, and he walks back in at that stage of his career, that to me. And again, I was a wrestling fan, and then I was a wrestler and a promoter. So I look through the eyes of a promoter quite often now. But that to me, from a UFC perspective, is very concerning. Regardless of what you think about the WWE, or regardless of what you think about Brock Lesnar, when you have a guy that hadn't fought 7 years and he's your top star, I definitely would be concerned about that.
Well, I want to say, first and foremost, it's amazing after 15 years finally having kind of a public sit down with Jeff Jarrett. It's amazing what you've accomplished just in the Hall of Fame, obviously. Now this huge partnership with Fight TV, which of course we're a little biased toward as well here with the Voice of Wrestling. We air there every Wednesday night, 5 o'clock Eastern. So we like it, and we're really excited about what you've got with these one-man shows coming up later this month. But Jeff, I'm sure that's kind of just my gut feeling, just my opinion. I don't know you. We've only talked for 30 minutes here. I have no clue, but my gut feeling tells me that maybe there's still more on the horizon at this point for Jeff Jarrett. He seemed like a guy that might not be settling anytime soon, and probably specifically in the wrestling business. But, of course, I don't know that. Just tell us a little bit about what you think maybe the next 5 years looks like for Jeff Jarrett.
Well, I can assure you this. If you guys are around, the shorter answer is stay tuned to this show.
Yeah.
And I don't say that with tongue in cheek. I don't say that but if you're on Fight and I can see Global Force and Fight, we've got we really do. We got some really cool projects in the works coming down the pipeline that Fight rapidly growing. I don't have to tell you guys,
sure.
but with the technology and you don't have to when you watch content on here, you don't have to worry about the buffering. And I don't want to get into a sell job, but that is exactly what drew me to this is the technology and the ownership and the management group. But no, I'm super excited and stay tuned to this show. Stay tuned to Fight. Stay tuned to globalforcewrestling.com and my social media accounts at Real Jeff Jarrett. But because we've got stuff coming, and like I said earlier before we rolled on the air, that I'm the guinea pig, and I'm happy to talk about it. But the spoken word tour, it's the first time ever, to my knowledge, that a spoken word tour has been done live, no net. Jumping into it, looking forward to have a lot of fun. Kenny McIntosh, the host, he's agreed to take off the gloves, and so jumping into it. And like I said, StarCast, everything's coming down the pike, but I'm excited. And 2018, I've been amazed. It's what's happened through the first 6 months, and the next 6 months, what we have lined up is going to be even better.
Well, Jeff, I want to say thanks so much for coming on. Good luck with the show. I know I'm going to be watching. I'm sure 100%. Chris is going to be watching. We're definitely going to have to get you back on this show to get your reaction to that live show, because I think that's going to be one hell of an experience, not only for the fans, but for you doing it for the first time like this. So we'll have to have you. We'll have to have you back on so you can talk about how it went. And, whenever else you got another big project coming up.
I appreciate it, guys. And next time, don't be so damn long-winded. You guys told me we were going to be on 20 minutes. I've just looked at my watch. We're almost into the hour. So anyway, guys, I
timed it. I listened to your whole country music song before either one of us was able to get a word in. I think I listened to it twice. I covered it on my own.
And that is a long song, so that's taking a lot of ground. No, you guys have a great night.
Hey, Jeff, thanks so much, man.
We'll talk soon.
Congrats.
Talk soon.
Guys. Jeff Jarrett here on The Voice of Wrestling, of course. What a week, man. It's been a great thing. Nick, obviously, we've still got a lot to discuss for next week. We've got a huge pay-per-view coming up. There's going to be a lot to discuss. I don't know if you're going to be here next week, Nick. But either way, Jeff Jarrett, thanks a lot. For Jeff Jarrett, of course, he's Nick Paglino. I'm Chris Cash. This is The Voice of Wrestling on Fight TV, and we will see you next week.